Hey guys, it's Mike with Become the Night. Hope you're doing fantastic today. Today I'm going to be doing my first album review. It's going to be Dream Theater's The Astonishing. On a side note before we get started, I had a request from a viewer to review one of his songs, and I will be doing that eventually. If you guys have any music you want me to review, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Fair warning to all of you, I will not be kissing anyone's ass or blowing smoke up anyone's ass. I'll tell you exactly how I feel about it. And one more thing before we get started, this will have spoilers in it. Believe it or not, this album has spoilers. You'll understand as we get into it, but just fair warning, spoilers. Some general thoughts about the album. My first reaction to it was I loved it. Absolutely loved it. The concept of what it was supposed to be was truly awesome. The idea of The Astonishing as a concept album goes beyond what the traditional concept album was. They were trying to tell a literal semantic story through music. I think Dream Theater knew that they had a daunting task ahead of them when they were trying to accomplish this because their lyric book was a screenplay. And in addition to that, they have a website which explains in greater detail what the hell's going on in this album. But to me, yeah, I was super stoked, loved it when I first heard it. I will admit now, though I didn't admit as much then, there were certain parts that were kind of like, this is a little flaky, just kind of too lovey-dovey, too on the nose, not enough subtlety. And Lord knows Dream Theater is not known for subtlety. As I started to listen to it more, I did start to hear some of the more weaker points in it, especially when I started to dissect the story better. For the majority of these songs, the composition is awesome. As per Dream Theater style, they are really technical, but at the same time can be very mellow and smooth. They know how to speak to the mood. John Petrucci does a tour de force like every freaking album. Jordan Rudess did some of the prettiest things I've ever heard him do on this album. I mean, I know he's an amazing keyboard player in general, but this one, it's like he stepped away from being prog and was just like, I'm a piano player, and it was gorgeous. John Mayung, as per usual, kind of sits into the background, but it's not a bad thing. I've noticed with a lot of Dream Theater stuff, the bass does not come forward a whole lot, but it's doing a lot more work than you realize. And in this album, I would say not paying attention to the bass is a beautiful thing. Now, Mike Mangini, wow. I've always had a lot of respect for Mike Mangini. Obviously, he's one of the greatest who has ever lived. He held several drumming records for several years. But besides featuring on Steve Vai albums now and then, I wasn't 100% sure how much range he had. Now, I will say this, he definitely likes a tighter sounding drum kit and drum mix than Mike Portnoy. I love how natural Mike Portnoy's drums sound, and it makes you feel like you're there. But in contrast, I really like how tight and deliberate Mangini's delivery is. It's very tight and deliberate, but it still feels so natural. It's crazy how he can accomplish that. And that is the biggest thing I love about his work on this album. Is he was able to play exactly what was needed. There wasn't anything that was too much, there was nothing that was too little. It just sat right in. As far as the songwriting goes, I liked most of the songwriting. As Dream Theater does, they try to push the boundaries, push the limits, try and incorporate different stuff, go new directions. And I really like that they incorporated stuff like ragtime, they incorporated Latin themes and beats. And they also incorporated things like gospel. They actually got together a real live orchestra and had them perform this, a real live choir had them perform this, and mixed it into the mix. And then there are the other songs. The real, like, acoustic guitar, getting moody, like, the really bad cliche 1980s stuff, like the Full House theme song, but worse. Don't get me wrong, I love the Full House theme song, but I mean, it's like so cute and so deliberate, it makes you want to puke. The thing that really got me so excited for this album in the first place was it was bigger than just being a music album. They were trying to tell a story, but not just like a simple story, like a pretty complex story, and have it set in like a post-apocalyptic type world with a feudal society. They said they were influenced by things like Star Wars and Game of Thrones. That's always a good start. So the idea that they were trying to tell a story strictly through music on a 2-disc album was really awesome. And if Like, typically, if I would hear someone's doing this, I'd be like, it's probably gonna be crap. Probably gonna turn out like High School Musical or something like that. But it was Dream Theater, so I was like, all right, these guys are super really freaking talented. Let's see what they can do. It's probably gonna be crazy if you need a companion website just to get the full meaning of everything. But then that lends to a downside. Did they really accomplish their task of trying to tell a full story through an album if they need a companion website to explain and fill in the details? Now, Dream Theater, in order to accomplish this, and I think this was very wise, drew a lot from musicals and opera type songwriting. They had to try and paint a picture that you could visually see in your head with music, and at the same time had to make things distinct enough so you could tell what characters were doing what. They are definitely excellent at being able to make you feel something. Whether or not you were feeling that thing that they wanted you to feel is debatable, but you could definitely tell there were very distinct themes for each character. The main character, Gabriel, generally had themes that were more wholesome and mellow, like traditional singer-songwriter lovey-dovey crap. Lord Nefarious almost consistently always had a more Latin theme worked into it, which made it more staccato and made it feel a little more regal, which I thought was cool, even if it was slightly cliche. And all of ARHYS' themes, who is Gabriel's brother, they were all very emotional, very powerful, very grandiose. You could feel that the character had a lot of internal conflict going on, and a lot of strong emotions. Now, having said all this and giving this album a ton of praise, there were definitely a lot of missed opportunities. For one, vocals. Now hear me out, James LaBrie, I like you, you do a really good job, and as a matter of fact, this is probably the best vocal performance that you've ever given. It was really clean, it was really tight, it was also very dynamic. To tell a story this semantically, I think you maybe even have had to gone further than what you did. Not to diminish what you accomplished, but I just feel like more dynamic range between emotions and between characters would have served this better. Now let's get to the part of the actual story. This is where real spoilers begin. I'm not gonna break the whole thing down because it's very long and pretty complicated, but there's just certain points that come off as not believable, like it doesn't sell it to me. It kind of ruins it as a story. Like at the very end of the story, the guy who I would say is truly the main antagonist kills two people. And the second person that died is in love with Gabriel, and Gabriel's in love with her, and they're all like, oh no, like so cliche. The whole town is gathered around, all the main characters have gathered around, they're all sobbing as a group like the Who's down in Whoville. Like, seriously, exactly like the end of The Grinch or some shit. And she's about to die, and you want to know how they save her? The power of music. Literally, Gabriel can't sing anymore. He's supposed to be blessed with this, like, otherworldly power of being amazing at music, and he can't sing because he yelled so loudly when she died. So all of the townsfolk, the tall and the small, started singing Yahoo Dores and all that bullshit. Yeah, it was cliche as all hell, and she comes back to life, and you're like, not only was there no consequences for this, but you took away those consequences in the most cringy way possible. That's just one example, and probably the most disappointing example to me, because it took this story that I actually thought was pretty interesting and kind of baked it down into like a kind of stupid ending. But there are other smaller, more subtle examples of that throughout, which takes me to a partner point just being a little less cliche. The thing wasn't completely cliche, it wasn't completely predictable throughout, but there were certain parts you're just like, I've seen this a million times. And the characters' names, oh, the characters' names. When the guy that in the beginning you think is the main bad guy is named Lord Nefarious, you can do better than this, guys. Or the brother's name, who is the leader of the militia, is named ARHYS. Or the main girl, who's supposed to be the saving grace of her father, is named Faith. For God's sake, please get better names. And the last missed opportunity, or more of a misstep I would say, is just too much lovey-dovey crap. I appreciate the emotions they were trying to convey during those parts of the album, like the really heartfelt parts, the parts where you're really happy, parts where you're trying to express love. But musically speaking, it kind of goes hand in hand with the way they named the characters. It was just too on the nose, like you were treating me like an idiot. I know that wasn't their intention, just the way it came off. Now, having said all that, this was an amazing feat, in my opinion, by any band to try and tell a story this intricate and complex in an album. How do I think they fared? Not bad, especially for a first attempt, pretty damn good. I think if they tried it again, they would do way better. But this is taking music in a step in the right direction, in my opinion, trying to push the boundaries, trying to say, what can we really do with this? What can we really express with this medium? And how can we tie it into other mediums and truly make it universal? At the same time, this also presents a problem, which was the first problem I saw with this. How are you going to sell this to people that just want to listen to some music? These songs did suffer slightly because they were trying to be so ambitious with this. If you didn't go into this with the right context or right mindset, you probably wouldn't like this album that much, especially if you're like a metalhead listening to it for metal stuff. This is not a good metal album. It's a really good prog album in my opinion, but not a very good metal album. Back to the storytelling portion of it. There was one song in particular that is probably my favorite on the whole album that I think exemplifies where this type of album creation, storytelling, and songwriting can go. The song is track 5 on disc 2. It's called The Path That Divides. I'm about to set up the story for you to give you the context, so spoiler warning. Basically, Gabriel is this guy who is born with some insane gift of music, like otherworldly gift of music, to where everyone explodes with joy when they hear him do anything. He lives in a dystopian future in an empire ruled by a tyrant. The tyrant's like, no. Gabriel's brother, ARHYS, leads the militia in their local town, and he's like, yeah. The tyrant's son, the prince, is all like, I'm neglected. I have an inferiority complex. I'm gonna go try and capture this guy and prove how awesome I am. So he runs into ARHYS' son. He's all like, yo, I have a knife. You're my bitch now. ARHYS is like, no, don't do it. And he says, I'll let him go if you hand me over Gabriel, and I'll give you guys the best life you've ever had. ARHYS agrees, and they go and set all this crap up. So this is the part where they're about to hatch the plan, and ARHYS is sitting here having second thoughts. Does he hand his brother over to the bad guy and give him and his son the better life? The one thing he's been fighting for this whole time? Or does he sacrifice possibly his and his son's life in order to give everyone else a better life? The way Dream Theater sets up this scene and the way it plays out is not exactly the way that I saw it, and personally I think the way that I saw it was better, but doesn't take away from the emotional conflict, the emotional gravity of what's happening. Alright, so it starts off very mellow, very atmospheric, kind of darkness in the tones. I love this intro. The strings kind of give a softness, again, dark timbre, and the note selection is very eerie. The intro sets this up as like, you know something is awry, something is feeling off. There's a conflict that needs to be resolved. It's like ARHYS is still denying the reality of what's happening and just trying to go along with this plan in order to make things easier for him when he knows he shouldn't be doing this.
The evening stars shine brightly over heaven.
This is the narrator saying this.
As night descends in silence, the fading scene unfolds. Consumed with trepidation, ARHYS hears his brother's voice. As you're facing the path that divides,
This part is beautiful to me. I'm already partially biased because I love that sound of doing the palm muted individual strings and then accenting with an open note, but it kind of takes the intro and expounds upon it. It kind of develops that theme. It sets up the scene for you. Yes, it's a dark night, it's quiet, and something nefarious is about. And it kind of waffles between this feeling of like, we're kind of major, but then we kind of waffle back to minor. Then we waffle back, well, maybe it's major in a different way. No, it's still kind of minor, and it keeps fighting it back and forth in little waves between those chord changes. As it's fighting back and forth between those waves, it's gradually rising in tension ever more. It's the battle between, is this the right thing that I'm doing? Am I really making the right decision? And just the fact that there's this conflict in the first place, that's a really decent indicator you probably made the wrong choice. And the production part where they said as he hears his brother's voice and then it's the echo of what they sang earlier, and they do this really cool thing with the verb and the delay and kind of like reverse it and move it back and front and side to side, and just really cool. I mean, it's not only in the practical purpose of it, but just listening to it just as a song by itself, it's a really cool effect.
I feel my pulse begin to race. Beads of sweat drip down my face. I have made a grave mistake. What have I done but blood for my son? It's not too late. I won't betray.
All right, so this part is where it's coming to a head. These two feelings that he has that are fighting each other have come to a head, and they can't both exist in him at one time. The staccato beat is really driving home the absolute nature of this decision. It's like, it's right or it's wrong. There's good and there's bad. Not to mention the rolling snare, kind of like in a military fashion, is a callback to one of ARHYS' themes. Then building more ugliness and more tension with the constant use of tritones in this, culminating at this huge explosion of emotion when it finally clicks for him, just turns over, and he says, no, this was a bad decision. I gotta make this right. Now, this part is where Dream Theater's vision and my vision kind of diverge. They see him as already at the amphitheater waiting for this whole thing to go down for the other two characters to arrive. I always saw this as this whole time he's on his way to go get Gabriel and go fetch him, bring him back to lure him into this trap. And then right when he had that snap at the last part, this is the part where he turns around, guns it for his horse, gets on, and is flying full speed to go and stop the prince. On his way, he's chugging along, and the only thing he's saying to himself is, God, no, why did I let this happen? How could I have done this? Kind of reminds me of the same feeling of like when you're a kid and you're doing something that your parents know you're not supposed to do while they're gone, and you're sitting here messing around with something you shouldn't be, and something goes horribly awry. And you're like, oh God, when are they gonna come home? And you're just frantically running around trying to fix everything. Kind of the same thing, except a lot less comical and a lot more serious. And then it does this really cool metal rap part that really shows the dirtiness and the grunginess. Like he just came eye to eye with the prince. They're staring each other down, and you can feel the gravity of what's happening. Two warriors staring each other down in the eyes, and at this moment they know one of them is not walking out of here alive. Kind of reminds me of the end of Good and Bad and the Ugly, where the three of them are all standing in the circle and they're all kind of keeping an eye on each other while slowly moving to the best position they can. Now, this next part always gives me chills. Not the immediate next part, but the way that it culminates to this big finish. The next part has a lot of staccato beats and then actual samples of people like swords clashing and two guys fighting. And the way that those samples are put into the music itself is actually in rhythm and kind of is a syncopation to the beat that's happening, on top of which is still like a little bit of a push, a little bit of a pull so that it feels natural and real. It's just really well done. And then at the very end, the prince gives ARHYS a mortal blow and puts him down. And ARHYS is just laying on the ground. These are his final moments, and he's realized that he made the wrong decision. He tried his best to make up for it, but he still had to die for his sins. This is a perfect example of what I mean by the vocals should have been a little bit more emotionally dynamic. In this one song, we had like the very smooth and almost kind of eerie beginning vocals, and at the very end, he's just exploding with emotion. If they would have been able to accomplish what they accomplished in this song with the entire album, I think this would have been a much bigger success. In conclusion, I still really like the album a lot. I still listen to a lot of these tracks on the regular basis. Having said that, there's still quite a few of them that I don't listen to. I just kind of hit the skip on it. I love that they tried to be this ambitious with the album where they wanted to tell a full, complex saga. Now, of course, it cost them because I imagine most of the people listening to Dream Theater aren't trying to get some kind of high art experience. But all in all, I think it was really good. Obviously, there are places they could have improved, but I still like it. There are talks of there possibly being a book or a movie or a video game or something along those lines. And in that sense, this is something I wish they would have done more of in the album, which is world building. I wish they could have really taken me there, which, I mean, I'm not sure how they could have accomplished that one way or the other, but just would have been cool. One of the reasons why you like these stories like Game of Thrones and Star Wars is because you are sucked into where they are and you believe it. You know, it's like it's a whole universe of, it feels like it's lived in, it feels like it's real. I definitely recommend you guys check it out if you haven't. Of course, be prepared because it's not a traditional album. You can't just sit down and listen to it. I mean, you can, but you probably won't enjoy it. You need the context of this being a story. You need the lyrics. I would highly recommend going online and getting the guide and listening to it while reading it your first time through. But yeah, all in all, I like it. So that's my opinion on this. Let me know your opinion on this album in the comments below. And again, if there's any other albums you'd like me to review or critique, or if there's any of your own tracks that you'd like me to critique, let me know in the comments. We'll work it in. As always, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Rock on.